Ooh.
I know, it's so exciting. We have 9 participants, we have 13, we have 17 participants. This is very exciting.
22, 24, 26.
This
Look at them
is
all.
exciting. We're expecting just under 100 people.
Oh,
So
Jesus.
welcome aboard, everybody. Come on in. We're just waiting for those numbers to.
Somebody. There's a panelist who's.
It's Bluesy Bluesif.
Bluesy Bluesif. Hi, Bluesy Bluesif.
We have nothing else to do. Cindy, that's not true. There are many people watching from overseas. When I say many, at least 3. So at least 3 of you are not captive lockdown audience members. Hi, Rodney. This is exciting.
Hi, Rodney Todd.
Thanks so much for joining, everybody. We're just going to give it another couple of minutes because we are expecting quite a few people. So, hi. Oh, Buckers, hello.
Buckers?
I know my level 1s are here. The WhatsApp group is going off.
Love that.
Oh.
Bluesy Bluesiv, who I don't know who that could be, is flirting with us all.
Sounds like a fake name.
Everybody, my mother has joined the chat and raised her hand. Hello. That's very exciting.
Why is there an entire orange in my glass? It's not. It's the drink itself is orange. It's a rusty nail. So I gotta. Hi, Nico.
Oh, my neighbours here, my level 2 class is here. What a great turnout. Thank you so much, everybody, for jumping on in. That's so lovely. That's just great. I hope everybody's doing okay in lockdown. Most of you are all Sydney based, so hopefully this will be a really fun distraction. Glitter pony in the house. I don't know what that means, but I'm excited about it. This is great. Liam, long-time listener, keen for the show. Would we call it a show? Would we call it a slightly formalized version of the chats we have at the pub after class? Who knows? Cool. All right, everybody. I think we will just get into it. Welcome to the first ever Improv Theatre Sydney Rant Academy. This is very exciting. Before we jump in tonight, I just wanted to take a moment to acknowledge that while we're all zooming in from different places around Australia, and I've got a few overseas viewers as well, welcome. I'm speaking tonight from unceded Gadigal land, and I want to pay my respects to the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation and extend that respect to elders past and present. This always was and always will be Aboriginal land. Thank you all so much for joining us. This is really so exciting. What a thrill. You can see, pumped, yes. This chat's going off. I'm so excited that so many of you are here. Welcome. I'm really excited for tonight because, like I said, this is just a slightly more structured version of the chats that we beautiful improv nerds that we are at Improv Theatre Sydney love to have and love to use to derail staff meetings. So over the next few weeks, we're just going to have a bunch of really great chats / tantrums / beautiful, sincere, thought-provoking conversations amongst us and with you. And I think it's going to be a lot of fun. You can see alongside me beautiful Cale and Jeeves and Anna, who are our first cabs off the rank tonight. They've got some fantastic topics lined up, which we'll jump into soon. But before I introduce them properly and before we get into our rants, I thought I would tell you a little bit about why I want to do this series of talks and where it kind of came from. First of all, it's not because we're in lockdown, but it's great timing that while we can't do any sort of face-to-face practical workshops, we can use this time to kind of have some nerdy, fun chats about our craft. But the real reason that I've wanted to do something like this for a long time is that it kind of bothers me that when we talk about comedy and improv, there is sort of an expectation and a bit of pressure that you will be funny while you're discussing your funny craft. And I think that's unfair because painters don't have to paint portraits when they're discussing their craft, and operatic singers don't have to sing an aria at the same time as discussing their craft. But when it comes to comedy, we feel like we have to be on and we have to be doing bits. And while so many of the talks over the next 4 weeks will be funny, some of them will be very sincere, very earnest. Some of them will be tantrums. And all of that's fine. So I just kind of wanted to create an opportunity for our faculty and our guests to be able to talk about their craft in a way that could be funny, but doesn't have to be. It can be as silly and as sincere or both as they like. So yeah, I think it's important to know that anytime you laugh tonight, that's entirely not the point, and it's purely coincidental and not what we've set up to do. Yeah, so it's just going to be a fun kind of happy space to explore our craft a bit. This is how it's going to work. Every Rant Academy, we're going to have 3 special guests. They each have 5-ish minutes to rant on a topic close to their heart. After they have all spoken, I'm going to open the floor up for a bit of a Q&A. You can see down the bottom of the screen here that there's a little Q&A button. You can press that and submit a question at any time tonight, and those questions will just be visible to me and the panelists. And once we've heard from all our speakers, then I'll call on you to ask your question. If you would prefer me to ask it on your behalf, if you want to remain anonymous, that's fine. Just mention it in your question. Otherwise, I'll call on you and you can unmute and ask away, and that will be great. The rules of engagement are very simple. Keep it fun, keep it polite. Also, I can mute anyone, and I will. Maybe I won't. Maybe I'll just watch Improv Theatre Sydney burn to the ground over the next 4 weeks.
Are we the only people speaking that you can mute? You would just be muting me, Jeeves, and Anna, wouldn't you?
I know what I said.
Okay.
Oh, the last thing that I wanted to say is that while I've just talked up how serious and rich academically this series is going to be, I don't want to undermine that. I want you to take me really seriously. So I will be wearing this, which my friend doing a lockdown clear up found she still had. So I'll be wearing this. And I hope you all take me seriously. Mute him, says Bluesy Bluesive. All right.
Fake name.
Fake name. Dr. Connell. Thank you so much, Dr. Connell. The respect I deserve. All right. Cale Bain, you all know him. You all love him, but I'm going to introduce him anyway because I'm very prepared and wearing a hat. Cale Bain is one of the founding directors of It's Improv Theatre Sydney. He has been performing improv comedy for a long time. He's taught, directed, and produced all over the world. This is very distracting, and I've regretted it immediately. He was the improv director for Foxtel's Whose the Line Is It Anyway Australia. Cale Bain established Sydney's first ever regular long-form improv show, Full Body Contact, No Love Tennis, which was also the first time I ever got paid to improvise. I got $14 and I was very excited. In amongst all of that, Cale Bain is finding the time to complete a PhD. Tonight, he has some opinions on why you should stop asking your improv teachers for specific feedback. So to kick off, it's Rant Academy. Here's Cale Bain.
Hello, thank you. Thank you very much, Bridie, for doing this. I'm also on Gadigal land, so I pay my respects to elders past and present. My talk comes out of a faculty meeting that we had not long ago, where a question was raised: how do you give specific feedback to someone who's asking for specific feedback? And we teachers often get questions for specific feedback, and I'll tell you, don't ask for that. We give it to you already. We're giving you feedback in your workshops. And generally, the feedback that we give you is about many people and will apply to you, even though we might not say your name. I think better questions to ask than can I have specific feedback? I mean, I understand that where it's coming from, where you're coming from if you're asking for specific feedback. You want to get better, you want to be like that player over there who's really good with words, you want to be like that player over there who's really good with physicality, and you want to improve. All of us want to improve at everything. I would love to speak more languages than I do, but I don't. This is why we're people, because we get better at what we do. So it's a good question, but I have a better question for you to ask. Are you having fun? That's the question you should be asking. Because if you're just asking, can I have specific feedback for myself? You're worried about your play. I want you to instead worry about your scene partner's play. I want you to instead to think about how your scene partner is having fun and how your scene partner is being challenged, and if you're fucking around with your scene partner in a way that's safe and fun and jovial, in a way that's mischievous and, you know, in the spirit of improv. I want you to think about not what kind of feedback do you have for me, but how can I get into everybody else and make this so much better in all these different directions. Generally, these questions about personal feedback come from a place of, a little bit of anxiousness about, am I doing well? And if your teacher doesn't give you direct feedback, you're doing fine. You're doing great. Keep doing what you're doing. You're doing great. We should give you direct feedback. But sometimes there are other people that have really specific things that are ringing out that we'll directly look at. Sometimes other people have things that they've done particularly well that we'll directly look at. And then we'll use those as frameworks for notes for the whole class. So in general, you're doing great. You don't need the specific feedback you're after. Think about your scene partners, play with your scene partners, look at your scene partners, and look at, like Kate Coates says about this question, look at other improvisers and think, oh, how can I play like them if I want to? What can I challenge about my own play? What am I doing regularly that I might want to try differently? What are my patterns that I'm doing over and over again that I might want to change up? Yeah. That's the end of the rant.
I loved it. Sorry, wait. I loved it. Well done. This is a very distracting hat, but I love it. Clap, clap, clap. Thanks, Linda. We've got some great questions coming in already. Just a reminder, you can send a question anytime you like.
I'm not answering these questions now, am I?
Not now. We're going to save them and have a little bit of a discussion at the end with everybody. Although I will say that one of the questions is, has Cale ever asked for specific feedback?
I 100% have. I fully own up to that. I 100% have.
And all I want to do right now is give you very specific feedback on your rant. Look, everybody's loving it all the time. Yes, beautiful. I love that. I really think it's a nice idea as well to think about better questions that you can ask for yourself in your play, in your journey to improve. So we will talk more about that after our next two rants. Thank you, Cale. I hope you feel good to have gotten that off your chest. Beautiful. All right, let's get straight into our next one. Our next rant, I'm very excited to hear because this is speaking about a topic which I also really love. Our next speaker is Anna Renzenbrink, who is a tremendous teacher and performer. Primarily, she trained with Improv Melbourne. She's been improvising for over 15 years. She's one of my favorite people to watch on stage because she brings so much warmth and intelligence to all her scenes. Anna has performed all around Australia and the world. What a cool list, including participating in festivals in Canberra, Phoenix, Austin, New Zealand, Amsterdam. So cool. You're a jet setter. Tonight, Anna is going to talk about one of her great loves and mine, historical improv, and she's got some thoughts about how you might be ruining it. So here she is to talk all about historical improv. Over to you, Anna.
Thank you, Bridie. And everyone, I'm speaking to you today from Gaymigal Land, which is Manly in the Northern Beaches. And I love historical drama. I absolutely love putting a bonnet on and prancing about the stage as if I was back in the 1800s. But I loathe watching people mash up their Jane Austen with their Dickens and making jokes about answering the telephone in the middle of the drawing room at the expense of the honest commitment to those authors and those narratives. So I would like to challenge people to play those historical genres and honour them and do their research. And you can do so much research on YouTube, reading novels, watching the movies, rewatching Colin Firth dive into the pond. There's so many adaptations of those classic English novels. There's no excuse for you to put your backpack on while you're striding across the moors, or to complain about getting a parking ticket on your carriage. And I think often what happens in scenes, particularly maybe in theatre sports or sort of genre mashups, people panic a little bit and they think they have to go for an anachronistic gag in order to get a laugh, rather than really honouring the status games and the overreactions that people have to things happening unexpectedly, which will naturally bring laughs. You know, a heartfelt proposal being rejected is going to get a better payoff from the audience than, you know, someone, I don't know, pulling out a mobile phone, you know, and going, oh, my telephonic device is calling. There's a lot you can do to research these genres and pay attention to things like when electricity was invented and when people were riding in a barouche and not a carriage. Does anyone know what a barouche is? Well, you should if you're going to attempt to do Jane Austen improv. All you need to do is drop some great vocab. That's all you need to do. You just need to read 2 chapters of Pride and Prejudice and you'll have all sorts of wonderful material to use. And it really saddens me to see improvisers playing in these genres and maybe getting the language right and really working on some, you know, nice British accents, and then slouching and not holding themselves as if they're wearing a corset or some pantaloons. And the other thing I want to rant about is blending your Downton Abbeys with your Jane Austens, because they're very different. Jane Austen doesn't care about the servants. You don't see a servant getting a storyline in a Jane Austen book. Downton Abbey is a great soap opera, but it's Edwardian, people. It's Edwardian. It's not Regency era. So you need to get your timelines right. You need to know your Georgian from your Regency. You need to know which queen was alive and which king was dead when, and bring some real truth to your Bonnet work.
Oh. Mwah! I loved that. Look at the chat. This is exquisite. Preach. Absolutely. This has obviously struck a chord with everyone. Anna, you legend. I am learning so much. So am I. And I immediately feel like I need to go and do a whole bunch of research, because I'm very guilty of inadvertently doing a lot of anachronistic things when I'm...
No, when gaslighting was introduced?
Let me just remind everybody as well, there are a couple of questions that got posted in the chat down the bottom of the webinar screen, so not the chat button, but next to raise hand there's the specific Q&A button, so you can pop your questions in there and then I'll keep track of them all. So once we've finished all the rants, then I'll hand over, so that's where your questions will go. But I've kept a note of that question, Kieran, so we'll come back to that after we've heard from Jeeves. I loved that. I also love the term bonnet work. That was fantastic. And Josh has said, yes, this is a truth we should all universally acknowledge. Fantastic. Good from you, Josh. We love it. That was great. Anna, do you feel better for getting that off your chest? Excellent. This is what we're here to do, everybody. We've got one more rant tonight coming from Jeeves. And let me tell you what, it's already fired up the comment section of some of the posts that Kate Coates made this week. Mute him, says Cale. I'm really excited because I know already that the faculty have some strong opinions on the topic we're about to hear Jeeves discuss. And let's just get into it. We're going to talk about object work. And Jeeves, over to you. No, wait, I haven't done your bio. Wait, Jeeves, I got distracted. I got so excited about the opinions that we're about to hear. Jeeves is bloody hilarious. He's a stand-up and sketch comedian. He's performed multiple shows at Sydney and Melbourne comedy festivals. He's performed in a whole bunch of ABC and SBS comedy projects. In an inspirational tale, Jeeves began his relationship with it as a level 1 student, but climbed through the ranks and finished all 6 levels. He's performed in house teams. Now he's on the faculty and he's just an absolute bloody champion. Like I said, and I got so excited and ahead of myself, his rant topic tonight has already stirred up some opinions amongst the faculty. So I'm going to hand it over to you to talk about object work, Jeeves. Here we go.
Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, can I just preface this by saying 2 things. Firstly, the initial title for this rant was going to be called Nobody Cares About the Space Between Your Fingers When You're Holding a Pen, but that wasn't catchy. And the second thing I want to say is I do love object work. I wouldn't be ranting about object work if I didn't have a passion for object work. So I want you to know, and I'm so glad you can't pipe up while I'm talking. But so this is great. Just know it's coming from a good place. I'm a fan of object work. I believe object work does add substance to a scene. It grounds a scene to reality, and it grounds it to a physical space. So I'm a big fan. This rant mainly is about the subtleties of object work, and I think those subtleties can sometimes be distracting for a performer, like in an effort to get things 100% correct. I think it can also be distracting for an audience and distract them away from the point that you might be trying to make in the scene. I think object work is a form of visual communication. I think, like any language, if you can successfully communicate an idea, you've done your job. And yes, the better that you are at communicating, the better the experience is for the listener. I would like to if you can humor me, I'd like you to consider this graph. On this graph, we have how good the scene is versus the quality of the object work. Now, you might expect there to be a linear positive gradient relationship between the two, and for the most part, you'd be right. But I think the graph goes a little bit like this. Uh-oh. Sure, yeah, there is. Whether that be a linear relationship or a exponential one is up for debate. But really, you can see some fucked up thing going on in the middle there, and this is what I'm sort of talking about. But let's have a look at the graph in a little bit more detail. Now, you've noticed the first interesting thing about this graph is that it starts there, okay? Which means that you can have a scene that is, what am I saying? Oh yeah, you can have a scene, if you had 0 object work, it is still possible to have a good scene, okay? And that's if you had 2 talking heads who would just had an amazing dialogue. Okay, cool. This area here is bad object work. This is bad object work, and it still implies that it's a decent enough scene, okay? It's not an unpleasant experience. This area is a naughty area of bad object work where learning of object work does not occur, okay? This is the area, and this happens in every fucking class, where it'll be a talking head scene, and everybody's having a great time. The audience is laughing, and you think you're doing a good job, and you've got bad object work. Okay, this is where I think a lot of people are comfortable, and it doesn't inspire them to practice their object work. Once you get better at object work, sure, you can see a bit of an incline, and then something happens. And then something happens where you remember Kate Coates's words, that is like, remember the space between your fingers when you're holding a pen. I don't care about that space between the fingers, and I don't care how you hold a phone either. And I'll tell you why. Because, like I said, now phones look like this, but if I did this to you, it would take the audience a split second to be like, what's that person holding? And it's not until you put it up to your ear that's like, it's a phone. It's either a phone, a conch shell, or someone's listening to a tiny man and a cup of coffee. It could be anything, is my point. But as soon as you did this, everyone knows that's a telephone. And you know what? For those teachers out there who are like, nobody holds a phone like this, fucking, you don't know that. You don't know how I hold my telephone, okay? So here's the thing. This is why the graph dips a little bit, I think, because this is where the audience asks for. This is where the audience get distracted and they ask, "What are they holding? What is this? What is this? Is it a tiny gem? No, it's a pen." And it's not until you do this that they're like, they've left space for the fucking pen. I hold my pens like this in every scene. No one's gone, that's a tiny pen. Or they might. Okay. So anyway, so there's this gap that happens where an audience might be like, I wonder what they're holding there. And it sort of distracts from the point of the scene. Now, well, I'm sorry, I've got points and I've just gone on a bit of a rant and not looked at my points. Let me just read.
Entirely the point. You're doing great.
Okay, great. Okay, so my point is, this is the battle between good communication and good object work. Okay, now I wouldn't suggest this if I didn't have, so it looks a bit like a bit of a gap. I wouldn't suggest this if I didn't have a suggestion for a way to bridge this gap. Okay, and for me, I think people don't venture into this area. This area is where object work is so good. I know there are teachers here that are watching going, Jeeves, if the object work is good, no one would have to question what they're holding in their hands. Yes, and that's this area here. This is like bear pack territory, right? You've seen their object work. Carlo's amazing at a click pen and a flip notepad and a pipe as well. But that is over here. This is when you've overcome this gap. And I feel like a lot of people hesitate to jump this gap because they're like, I've been told to do it this way, and so this is what I want to propose. If you want to get better at object work, you've got to jump this gap. You've got to don't think for a moment about how you hold your telephone is my point of this rant, okay? You want to hold a telephone like this because it's quick and easy and it gets the point across, do it, but acknowledge it. I think what you need here to jump this gap is confidence and emotion. If you hold a telephone like that, acknowledge it and be like, hey, yeah, I've got a special chip in my hand that communicates things. Please let me hand you this tiny pencil. Acknowledge it, I don't care. And in that space, when you get more and more comfortable with object work, I think then you can reach this sort of area here. And I think that's as far as I've got with my object work rant.
I loved it. Yes. Thank you, Jeeves. That was great. We got a lot of questions on that one, so I'm really excited.
Let's go, baby.
That was fantastic. I will just point out as well that when you add something to the chat, not the Q&A, but the chat, unless you've got it set to panelists and attendees only the 4 panelists can see it. So we can see some of your excellent sassy chat, but not everybody else can. So if you want to share your beautiful sassy chat with everyone, you've got to make sure you've selected panelists and attendees. Jeeves, this is great. You took a lot of people on a journey there. If you go through the chat, a few people have said, I started not agreeing. Now I can't stop agreeing, which I love. I'm with Jeeves, people. Good point from Liam. Inspector Gadget's phone came out of his fingers like that. So how does the audience know you're not a robot with a hand phone? See, this is
I'm just reading the question about the fork and knife thing. That is one of my pet hates about the fork. Like Carl, I think I heard Carlo say, this is how you use a fork and knife. Imagine doing that in a scene and you have a whole audience going, why is he pointing at his food like that?
Carlo has a whole 3-hour workshop.
Yeah, it's level 4.
Right?
Yeah.
Level 4.
Yeah, I'm like, don't worry about that.
For those of you who don't know about that exercise, that is self-explanatory. It was one of the questions that we just got then was about an exercise where you spend a whole bunch of time doing things like using a knife and fork or other everyday activities that we definitely have a shorthand of how to communicate them on stage, which is very unlike how we actually do them in real life. So it's an exercise where you kind of reset and relearn some of those things. Fantastic. All right. Well done, the three of you. All of those rants were fantastic. I have a rush of adrenaline just from hearing how fired up and passionate you all got. And we've got some excellent questions in the Q&A little function down here. So everybody, please feel free to keep adding them, and we're going to just jump straight on into some of the questions. Let's start. The very first question we got was from Buckers, Amanda Buckley. Hello, we're going to start with this question, which was pertaining to Cale's rant about specific feedback. And let me see.
I agree. So the question is, shouldn't all feedback be specific, timely, and future focused? I mean, if it's not specific, isn't it just rhetoric? I mean, no, it's not rhetoric. That's a different thing. That's talking about language. But anyways, what it is, it's useless. Feedback should be specific and tailored to what the lesson is about. If it's a class on formats and people are talking about the structure of a format, of course you can give specific feedback to individuals. But if you don't necessarily point an individual out and say, hey, that edit that you did, that you could have edited faster. I don't know. I don't think it's such a bad thing if Rhonda doesn't get specific feedback about her edits. But I do think that the feedback that is delivered in class should be specific. My problem is with people asking for more specific feedback than what they've already received in class, because I would argue that they do get specific feedback.
Yeah, I tend to agree with that too. And something that I wrote down when you were speaking, Cale, which I wonder if Jeeves and Anna, you have any thoughts on. I really liked how you sort of reframed it, Cale. Instead of asking for specific feedback, are there other more useful questions that you can be asking? For example, asking, am I having fun? Am I supporting my scene partner? So Jeeves and Anna, I wondered if you had any thoughts on when you are taking a class or teaching a class, the ways that you like to kind of frame that feedback, whether you're giving it or receiving it. What are some questions that you might ask?
Yeah, I think...
sorry, Anna, go.
I was just going to say, I think it is really challenging as a teacher of a class of, might be 14 to 20 people to be able to give someone really tailored, specific feedback. And that's often why we're being asked for it, if someone wants some personal attention. And I think focusing the student on some of the other outcomes of learning improv, like giving your partner a good time, is probably better, especially in the early levels of improv, than focusing a student on what they're doing poorly or they could do differently. I think we have a mindset of, I've done something wrong, I need to improve. And it's a constant battle to get people to focus on what's going well, what are they enjoying, and remembering that, rather than beating themselves up about something that they didn't do so well. And I think that's often what's coming out of those requests for feedback.
I think that's a really good point. Jeeves, any other thoughts or things that you look for?
When Cale mentioned the question, like, are you having fun? I think that resonated with me the most. I feel like a lot of, actually, one of the most useful questions that I've received from students is, what are my habits? What can you see are my habits, and how can I train myself out of those? Well, I'm paraphrasing, but I think that was a really good question, because sometimes you can't notice what you're doing because you're used to doing them all the time. So I think that's a really good question. Yeah, happy to. You can ask that to anyone as well. You can ask that to your peers. What do you find that I'm doing more often, and what can I be doing differently?
I think that's great. And all of those are really nice positive ways to look at feedback, because that can be a really confronting thing when you're getting feedback from a teacher. And especially, like we've all said, it's coming from a great place. You want to get better and you want to work on your craft. Claire Kavanagh is sass in the chat. Can I have some feedback on how you think my questions have been? No, Claire, quiet in the cheap seats. We've got another question for Cale here from Stevie to Cale. Is it at all appropriate to berate an individual in a class who persists with questions or just takes up time and energy on things that they are individually working through that maybe the class can't necessarily see?
Yeah, yes. Like, no, it's not appropriate to berate anyone in class, but if someone is derailing a class, fuck that. No, I don't have time for that. I don't know how else to answer that. And I like, as you know, old white cis Cale, I actually have an easier time with it than a lot of other people I've seen teaching. I've seen like particularly a lot of women whose workshop I've been in who will have men in their workshop who will be like, but what about this? And I've seen teachers just shut them down perfectly and with good reason. So yeah, I berate, maybe not, but like nip it in the bud. Yes, I think it is a useful thing because we're there to teach. We have a curriculum and we have a finite time to teach what we're going to teach. And
yeah, absolutely,
not the only student.
I think something I think a lot about when I'm giving feedback, and this is not so much about one student who's maybe like taking up time asking questions, but feedback generally, something I'm really aware about as a teacher is when scenes, quote unquote, go wrong or are derailed somehow. When we improvise, it takes a lot of bravery. The risk factor is high. There's no script. Public speaking for a lot of people is right at the top of the list of fears. And then you remove the script and it goes even, higher up the list. So I always want to be mindful that people are, taking a risk and getting outside the comfort zone when they improvise. And sometimes when things happen in a scene that kind of go wrong, you can usually tell the difference between people like knowing where the line is and deliberately crossing it, or just riffing and something comes off the top of their dome and it just doesn't land in the moment. I think it's our responsibility as teachers as well to make sure when we do give feedback, we can read that, because that can be a very scary thing for people who accidentally say something and it comes out the wrong way, or they make an offer and it just completely derails the whole scene. And if we don't handle that feedback correctly in the moment, we can scare them off coming back to class, which sometimes I feel the responsibility of. So Cale, I resonate when you say that sometimes it's harder or easier for different teachers to be firm with that feedback. I know it's something I need to work on, but I get really conscious of the fact that it's scary for a lot of people to be doing anything in class. Yeah. Okay. We've got a question for Anna based off Anna's rant. Where did it go? Oh, it was from Kieran. It was in the chat. So, great, Stevie. Okay, a question from Kieran before, just after Anna's rant, which was about when you're working in a genre where you feel out of your depth. Maybe you've been thrown into a scene or an offer's come your way that has put you in a genre or a time period that maybe you don't have heaps of knowledge about. What can you do on the fly if you're already in the scene and you know that your knowledge is not there? How can you avoid derailing the whole thing? Any thoughts, anyone?
Well, I would say be, authentic to yourself and your knowledge of that genre. And go confidently for that, and don't try to make jokes or call it out or comment as a way of avoiding failure. There might be someone like me in the audience who's going, oh, well, this is set in frontier times and that person just talked about going to the general store. There might be a few nitpickers, but I think the audience reads your intent. What are you looking at, Cale?
Because were there no general stores?
Not within a day's pony ride. pipe down. So I think the audience will read that intention, and you know, that your scene partners will help carry. I think I've always disliked kind of a commenty gag to cover up a mistake. I think just confidently make the mistakes and you know, say what you know as a starting point.
Which almost, it sort of ties into what Jeeves was saying about if you're aware that the way you're holding your phone is wrong, at least be confident about holding it wrongly, right? So confidence is one of, as we know, commitment and energy, and confidence are some of those major things we need. Jeeves.
But I also think that any improv scene is basically you're creating the universe for every scene. So if you and sure, if the universe of the scene is time-based, so if you are doing it in Victorian era or whatever it is, you are still creating your version of the Victorian era. So if there is a corner store, sorry, where do corner stores not exist?
Frontier times, according
Correct.
to
On
if
the
you're in a frontier
frontier.
times, yeah, if you're in a frontier time scene in a corner store, then like just that's the universe you've created for that scene.
I'm with Jeeves on this. If we're doing a scene about, you know, Nero's Rome, and someone gets a parking ticket on their chariot, then in that universe there are now Roman parking inspectors, and this is just part of the world that we have to honor. But I agree with you that it shouldn't be flippant. It shouldn't be like.
But there are moments where people are specifically at the top of their scene, or, you know, saying that this is what they're going for. We're going for a scene in the style of Jane Austen, or, you know, they're selling that show or that moment as that genre. And I think people can aspire to get to know that genre and get into the detail more, rather than falling on some quick gags. And I think falling on quick gags in any kind of improv should be avoided.
There's nothing juicier than honoring a genre. When you hear Carlo rant about anything historical in a scene, it's just oh my god, it's so much fun, and the audience.
Is this the same Carlo Ritchie whose Knife and Fork you hate? Is this the same?
He's a complex character, and I love certain things about him, and I disagree with certain things. Hey,
when I was learning improv, I did a lot of theatre sports, and there were often scenes and games that were about genre. So I embarked on a program of research, and I watched some westerns and some sci-fis and read some books, and just tried to get across a lot of those things. You know, and obviously overly focused on historical drama in, you know, Victorian England, but, you know, whatever, just so that I would have a little bit of a resource for some of those scenes when they came up.
I think that's smart. It gives you some confidence having that, you know, a little bit of a working knowledge. There's a question here, and then we'll move on to some Jeeves questions, but there's a question and a comment here, which I'll read out from a PhD history student, no less. So very good target audience for this particular rant, from Liam. To flip the focus from players not doing the work to be historically specific, do you think there's a tendency to assume that the audience won't buy in? Then Liam goes on to say, I've seen scenes set in the ancient world where some players really try hard to commit and others just get spooked and begin doing very broad Gladiator or Troy jokes as if they think the audience won't be patient with them. So do you think maybe some of our tendency to do anachronistic gags is just coming from a place of fear?
Yeah, I'd say so. And maybe there's a time and place for it, and the opposite is always true. And sometimes in a heavy show, that scene needs a gag, and that's the perfect thing to do to lighten the mood. And we just saw 3 people be gutted, and now we would like a parking ticket on a chariot. So I think we have to be careful about the generalizations, but I absolutely think, yeah, what's your intent? Are you going for a laugh because we've got 2 minutes left and we need to bring this home? Or are we going for it because it's a bit sloppy?
Yeah. Yeah. That's great. I think this is a very rich area to explore, and I think intention and the energy behind our performance choices are everything. All right, let's bring it home with some questions related to Jeeves as a rant, and we have got a few.
Let's go.
Let's go.
Can I just say that as much as I was taking the piss out of Jeeves, I wholly agree with Jeeves. I have a different rant. I don't know if I'm doing this rant at any point, but I have a different rant that's about improvisers' problems versus audience problems. And I don't think audiences give a shit about this. So I support you, even though I make fun of you, Jeeves. I support you.
Thank you, Cale.
That was my child. You hear my child there.
Well, let's get into
Bring it up.
We got some questions, and we also saw that the chat went off too. So first of all, really good practical question. Anyone can jump in. From Liz, how do you ensure your backline can see your object work if your back is to them, which happens a lot based on the stages that we might be in, the way we're set up, particularly if we're doing really little accurate pens or phones instead of big obvious things. Sometimes the backline does lose what we're doing. So can you think of any ways that we could make sure we're communicating?
For me, it's just about the reality of the scene. Like if that scene was to happen in reality, you're not watching people's actions all the time. So if there's someone who were to enter a scene, the reality is they haven't been watching your actions. So I think as soon as you're into scene, your job is to observe exactly what's going on and pick it up from there. I think, yeah, it helps to know what's going on from the back line so you can come in with an idea. But I think the beauty of this is discovering stuff in a scene at the time. So,
Yeah, no, I think I've loved this comment here that Cindy's just made in the chat. Sometimes the backline also just ain't paying attention, which that could be a whole rant topic too. I think people forget that if they're not in a scene, they're still on stage and they're still part of the performance, because there will be at least one person in the audience watching you at the whole time. Sometimes people zone out and they're not looking what's happening on the stage because they're thinking so far ahead. So it's really important that the backline's like always on. Linda says, agree with Cale and Jeeves. If audiences are pulled out of scene because you're holding a phone incorrectly, then there's something else wrong with the show. Interesting. And lots of nods. Great. Jen Mackey, I enjoyed this question. Jen says, would you rather a scene with no object work that needs it, or over the top, poorly done feedback at the end of it?
Oh.
I would also say that it's not everyone's forte. There's a wonderful improviser in Wellington, Christine Brooks, who cannot mime a steering wheel. She is open about it and she just won't try to do it. And I think it's okay that it's not your thing. And, maybe your teammates know that about you, and it can become a story within the show itself that you're terrible, and it could be, a running theme. But it might not be everybody's strength to do minute, detailed object work, and they can maybe leave room for other people to do it, or get themselves a fully dressed set and a table full of historically accurate props.
Bacchus has commented in the chat that comment about Christine will be getting back to her. I'd also take this opportunity to share with everybody tonight that Christine Brooks is actually my third cousin. Go New Zealand. It's a truth. She's my third cousin. It's a great time. Cool. Great. We've got time for a few more questions. Okay, we've got a question from Brendan. For Jeeves, does bridging the gap with a justification defy the point of clarifying or speeding up the clarity of your object work with known shorthands? Does that make sense? Do you want me to read that?
Say again, sorry?
Yeah. So for Jeeves, does bridging the gap with a justification about why you're holding your phone like this?
Okay. Sorry, I said to bridge the bridging the gap is basically in your confidence in jumping from here to here. I wouldn't say you justify the object work. You talk about the object work to bridge that gap. I would say if you're going to do something, do it with confidence and do it with emotion as well. So I think I think this is one of the reasons why people don't practice object work, and why it isn't a lot of people's forte, because they'll get to a point and be like, and they don't feel like they don't feel their truth in holding a knife and fork. So if this is how you've been taught to hold a knife and fork and you're going to practice it on stage, do it with confidence and do it with emotion. And I think I'm just saying, be confident with practice. Just practice it more. I don't know.
Hey, Oscar and Zeke, our other panelists have joined.
You never see Evel Knievel didn't make it across a cliff by taking his hand off the throttle. So you got to power through these things. And
sorry, I just said, to clarify, I'm not saying you got to justify the way you're holding a tiny pen every time you're holding a tiny pen. If you're doing that, commit to it. I saw Claire asked something about a tiny pen.
It was in the chat, not the Q&A, I think.
No, it was in the Q&A. Why on earth does pinching your fingers make more sense than leaving a gap for a pen? Because this is everyone understands this. This is what I mean by language, is object work is a language. Like this makes no sense to hold a phone like this, but everyone knows what that is immediately. Like if you did this, that's terrible object work, but everyone knows immediately that is, you're writing something. So it doesn't make more sense that that's a pen. It just, people don't have to think about it.
It's all made up as well, like literally all of this. So it's just funny that we have some ways which we think are more valid than others. It's all made up. Look, I think a really nice theme that has emerged from all of the rants is whatever we're doing, even if we know that we might not be getting it right, if we have lots of energy and confidence with it, then that goes a really long way. So that's a really lovely, it's a good piece of life advice as well as improv advice, I think. One last question, which harks back to where we started with Cale, but it will be, I think, a really nice one for us all to think about as we finish up tonight. A question, who asked it? It was about, oh yes, I think this is, well, it says Kieran, but I think it might be a Kate question. I think this is a good one for us to think about just to finish up. How do we help students learn to self-assess rather than relying on the teachers to provide external feedback or other people in the class? How can we be, more self-aware and self-assess?
So it's a really great question. I'm of two minds. And I'm not going to say one of them, but the other one is that I think that it's in our own teaching style, how we're critical of improv. And I don't mean criticizing, I mean critiquing. I mean like looking at how a person's improv fits into a scene. I don't mean just saying you did this poorly. I mean like, here's what happened and here's how these mechanics flowed in this scene. How we teach that and how we can express that clearly will help people think about improv a certain way. But I would ask people to think, I always ask students to think about, we were talking about this, I know other teachers that do this as well, to think about what did we like in a scene and what did we think that other options were? What did we think that things could go differently? Just so that people are always kind of spinning their wheels. It does two things though. It's a dangerous little cliff though, because when you've got that mindset in a workshop and then you go see a show, you got to turn that off to see the show, because you're never going to enjoy a show if you're like watching for fucking what kind of offers and what bullshit your teacher talked about in class. If you're watching for that in a show, just enjoy the show.
I love that. So true.
But the other thing is that also, here's the other part that I didn't want to say, is that fuck it, don't worry about it. Like Kurt Braunholler has a great quote where he talks about actually it might not be his quote, but he talks about how the best improvisers would be people that a troupe that could go to the top of a mountain and improvise for 1,000 years together and just do scene after scene after scene after scene and play and see each other play and try different ways of playing and just play and play and play. And, you know, they would be the best improvisers in the world. That's not word for word, but the sentiment is just play and have fun and try to find different ways of playing. And if you're not having fun, bring in a different part of your life to improv. Bring in your yoga to improv. Bring in your, you know, I'm an academic. I bring in my academy like theory into my improv all the time. Do poetry, do stand up, watch the news, know what's happening in the world, because that's super important. We had that drilled into us at Second City to like know what's going on in the world and have a thought about that.
I love that. Jeeves and Anna, do you have any other thoughts on that
about self-assessing? Yeah. So I came in having done years of stand-up, and at the beginning I can say I was terrible at improv. But the thing that I learnt from improv that I think made me even a better stand-up is that it changed from the me mentality to we mentality. So if you are self-assessing, you should be self-assessing of how we are doing as a troupe. That's why every group, like we've got it's house teams, we've got it's ensemble, like they're groups. No one's saying sure, people are saying he's an amazing, she's an amazing, they're an amazing improviser. But I think if you are self-assess, you are self-assessing as a group. It's like when you critique a scene, you said, how did we do, and how can we do better? So share your successes and share your failures together.
I love that. Anna and then Cale.
I would also say to not focus so much on the outcome. So a lot of students want to be good improvisers. So rather than focusing on the outcome, focus on sort of the steps that get you there, the basics and your values as an improviser. I want to look after other people in scenes. I want to be a supportive improviser. So when you reflect on that scene or that show, was I supportive? Yes, I was. You know, that's good for me, as opposed to going into a show thinking, I want to nail this show and I want to be awesome. I want to listen, I want to react, I want to start a scene and not hang back. So I guess focus on the steps rather than the outcome.
That's great. I love that. Really important to remember. Cale, did you have something to say?
Well, off the back of what both Anna and Jeeves are saying, is that like what we as people who have been improvising for a long time will look at a show and think who the good improvisers aren't always the funniest people. We'll look at the people who are looking at the scene as a whole or bringing a different dimension, and sometimes they're the people who you trust the least, who we think might be the best improvisers, because they're improvising holistically, not just like blah, 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 like with the jokes, with the comedy, with the comedy and the jokes, and the funny and the laughing.
I think that's great. I think all of these, are really great lessons that we can apply definitely to our improv. And I think there's lots of lovely stuff that we can take from those just to life generally. It's really nice, as Anna said as well, thinking less about the outcome and more about, are you having fun and learning and enjoying the process of it too. It's kind of where we started tonight with Cale's rant as well. So I like the symmetry of where we've ended up. Thank you to the three of you for your excellent rants, and thanks to everybody watching for all your great questions and comments. And I'm sorry that we didn't have more time to get to all of the questions, but I hope that you've got something fun and valuable from tonight. Next week, we have an international guest, which I will be announcing soon. I'm very excited about that. We're also going to have a really lovely not so much a rant, but a really lovely talk from one of our faculty members about the benefits of improv for people who struggle with anxiety. We're also going to hear about ways that we undermine ourselves on stage. So one of our rants is going to be about why we panic and sometimes interrupt each other, or even our own train of thoughts on stage. So I think we're in for some really interesting chats next week. So I will be announcing the program for that in the next few days. So keep an eye out on socials. But yes, thank you all for jumping into the first ever Rant Academy. This was really fun, and thanks so much, everybody. And yes, Stevie's asked a question that it will be every Thursday for the next 4 Thursdays. So yeah, same time, same place, your house, and we will see you next week. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.
Bye.